Welcome to the ISM New Jersey webinar series. A warm welcome to all of our ISM members and guests for joining us today. Please be sure to put in the chat your questions or comments. You may also use the Q&A tab as well. We would love to hear from you, especially during this presentation. Our presentation for today will be on key elements of project management for supply chains. Our speaker for today is Jane Tierney. We welcome you back. Once again, she is the founder of Purple Link, recognizing there's a better way to obtain value and achieve results from and through supply chains. Jane has earned both an industrial engineering and MBA degrees. She is passionate about Lean and Six Sigma. She is a certified Green Belt, and she has her CPSM and CPSD certifications. Jane also teaches these programs as well. Now, at this point, I'm going to turn the program over to you, Jane.
Thanks, Kathy, and thanks for the opportunity to be back here with ISM New Jersey. I am in the Los Angeles area, so I love the fact that we have this great technology that allows me to sit here in my home office and to speak to people like you all over the country and actually all over the world. So we are going to talk about project management today because this is a topic I think that comes up a lot. And there's a couple of different areas where project management and supply chain management seem to kind of intersect and overlap and interweave, and I think it's a very powerful combination. So I'll tell you just a little bit about myself, and that is that I have been a supply chain consultant since 2015, where I started my own business. Before that, I was in corporate America from various different companies across the United States and did a lot of traveling around the world with that. As Kathy said, I'm an engineer, but with a master's in business and a green belt. Since this is ISM, you all understand I have a CPSM and a CPSD, and I also am certified to teach courses, prep courses in that. So if anybody's interested in prep courses, I am doing those. I also have a Scrum certification that I got this year because I always feel like it's important to stay current, to keep learning new things, doing things differently, and kind of stay up with what's going on. So I am an adjunct professor in the California State University system. I teach operations management and supply chain courses. As my business, we focus on assurance of supply, process improvements, reducing cost always in the form of inventory, scrap, waste, wherever we need to, the company needs to reduce cost, which is everywhere. I'm big on metrics, KPIs, and OKRs. OKRs, if you haven't heard, is from a book called Measure What Matters by John Doerr. It's a very interesting book, and those are objectives and key results. And he's changed the KPI around a little bit, the key performance indicators, into being objectives and key results from those, and have found good business success with mentoring a lot of companies like Google and some other tech companies, as well as non-tech companies. I think that I spend a lot of time with clients on spend analysis and supplier management, as Kathy said, trying to help them get more value from and through their supply chains. So that's me. And today we're going to talk about project management. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the shared values of an organization like PMI, which is the Project Management Institute, and supply chains, because again, there's a lot of overlap and there's a lot of commonality there. I'm going to talk about project management applications in supply chains, talk about how that affects and relates to product life cycle and the phases there, talk about some of the challenges and why it's such a powerful combination. And then I'm going to give away some prizes. So I'll do a raffle at the end. And if you want to participate in the raffle, because I can't collect business cards, you're going to have to send me an email to jane@purplelink, all one word, .co. There's no M on the end. So if you send me that email, then I will look at those at the end. I have this cool little random number generator on my phone, and I will use that to pick a number and pick a winner. And you'll see what the raffle is at the end. So Thanks, Kathy, put that in the chat for you so you can check that out. And I'll give you some time at the end if you're not sure you want to participate yet. So this is, defining supply chains. You guys are all supply chain professionals, or most of you are, because you're at an ISM event. And so you understand that we have suppliers, and this graphic doesn't show tier 2, tier 3, and whatever, but there's a lot of suppliers, as we all know, manufacturers, distributors, retailers, customers, and with lots of ways to get products and services to the various customers throughout the supply chain. And then we have a flow up and down supply chains. When we talk about supply chains a lot, we think about products that are flowing up and down, but we also have a lot of information as well as funds, money, right? Because money makes the world go round, as they used to say. So we have that up and down the supply chain, all of that. And we want to make sure that when we have project management, that we're considering all of those things and all of those aspects, the products, the information, the funds, as well as the timing of the projects and things like that. So the Project Management Institute has its values, and supply chain values. These are pretty much my values, but they resonate with a lot of different organizations. I think mine dovetail pretty closely with ISM's values. So PMI has a value of impact to the profession, being a professional, volunteering and giving back. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are important, and that's something that a lot of companies are embracing these days, and the Project Management Institute has as well. Community, which kind of goes along with the volunteerism and taking care of the community that you live and work in. Engagement and ethics. So sounds pretty familiar. If you look at the supply chain side, we are really looking at the global impact of supply chains. Anyone who's been in this business for more than a couple of days realizes that there are tentacles in supply chains that go out, way out from wherever you might think they are at first blush. When the pandemic first hit, I worked with some people that are in some medical industries, and they said, well, we're not worried too much. We think it's a Chinese issue and we don't really buy anything from China. And I said, well, don't you make these kinds of medical devices? And they said, yeah, we do. And I said, okay, get ready. And so they came back about 3 or 4 months later and they said, man, Jane, you were right. We buy, some electronic boards and things like that, pretty basic things. But we found out that all of these parts are coming from China. And of course, we all found that the pandemic was not just related to China. We are still dealing with that. We have new variants that we're on the lookout for this winter and this fall and winter, and then into whatever goes next in that. I know for me, I have my boosters and I'm looking at, whatever might come next. And I'm not a person who ever got like flu shots, but this pandemic has lasted way longer than I thought. And it's gone around the world a couple of times, and I don't think it's done with us yet. So the impact of supply chains is far reaching. And if you look at the labels on the shirts that you buy and the clothing that you buy, a lot of that does not say made in America. There's a lot of electronics that are all over the world. We're finding out some of the things that come from Ukraine and Russia that we didn't maybe know about, and including like a third of the world's wheat. Don't buy much wheat from Russia or Ukraine, but other countries, especially third world countries located closer to them, are finding that out. So we know that we have a lot of global impact from the supply chains. We are professionals. If you weren't professionals, you wouldn't be here today. You wouldn't even know about an organization like ISM, much less be participating in one of its events. Volunteerism. I know I serve on the board of the local chapter here, ISM, and I serve on a couple other boards, and volunteerism is a big value in supply chains, is taking out and giving back and sharing what you learn, and leadership, all those kinds of things. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. I use those terms, the DEI, but in supply chains, we've known about things like valuing diverse businesses and having a diverse supply base so that we don't have all of our eggs in one basket, and that we're trying to support the communities through small businesses and a lot of different things. Myself, I've worked in defense and aerospace where we had goals on small businesses, and we had to track that and measure that. And we were always looking for good businesses to add to our portfolio of small businesses. So that in turn, that affects the community, and that's an important thing to be a part of, whether you live there, work there, both. It's all an important area. Ethics, of course, if you don't have ethics, then you shouldn't even think about supply chain as a career, because you won't last very long. It's a very, very ethical climate, and those people who chose not to work in that fashion don't work here very long. And sustainability, I've added that in because I think that's becoming more and more prevalent in a lot of the goals and initiatives I'm seeing. And the other acronym that you see now more than ever is I think it's GSC. So the governance, social, and compliance issues. And heaven knows in supply chain, we have lots of compliance things that we have to worry about. So that's an important thing. So let's talk a little bit about project management. Project management is a process, and you can find any number of processes, but typically they have something like the plan, do, check, act, or the actual project is more of an initiate the project, do the planning for the project, execute the project, you monitor and control while you're doing the planning and the execution, and then you close the project out. So that's one of the closure area is analogous in a couple of ways to closures of contracts in the supply chain business, but we don't always have clean closure on everything, although we do close out. It's an important aspect of a supply chain professional's job, is to make sure that their POs are closed out in a timely fashion and completely. I've never worked a place where we didn't have a couple of little aging POs, and so we had to look for those about every quarter. I think we would go in and run and say, you know, what's aging and what's held up, and can we close these, or do we need to actually do something about that? Is it something that we ordered 100 and got 99, but the PO never got closed out because that one piece never showed up and we don't really need it, so we can close that out. So lots of different aspects of that, but it is a process, and we use a lot of processes in supply chain, so we have similarities there. Another way to look at this, same kinds of things, a lot of 5 steps in the project management process. This one actually draws it as a circle, as we do a lot in supply chain, because when something ends, then it begins again. So that circular visual, I think, is an important part of that. Primary components of projects and project management, you'll see things like scope statements, critical success factors, a work breakdown structure, quality is important, stakeholders, communication. And if you look at that next to what we have in supply chain, they're very analogous. There's a lot of correlation there in what we look at in supply chain and what we need to manage a project. So in the project management world, you have a scope statement. We have statements of work. Critical success factors are always there. What does it take, and what's this gonna look like when it's finished and it's successful? Deliverables are key things. So we have to convey to suppliers, these are the deliverables. And if we're the supplier to the customer, what are our deliverables, and what form and what time and all those things. In projects, they have a work breakdown structure. In supply chain, we have bills of material. So this product that we make is made up of all these other components, and we need to make sure all those are accounted for. In a project, you have a work breakdown structure that might say some aspect of the work, and then it's got all the sub tiers in there. So there's a lot more to it. We all have budgets and schedules, and quality measures, metrics, KPIs are all inherent in both projects and in supply chain. We are always looking at those things. Both need human resources plans because we need people to make these things work and actually do the work. Stakeholders are an important component for both project managers and supply chain. Communication, and I always say communication, 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 very, very important up and down the supply chain and throughout the project. It's important to do that. Risk management and risk registers are ways to track that. And then the procurement plan for projects is a very important component, but we have that too. We have our make or buy decisions. What's outsourced, what's insourced? How are we going to approach this? What do we need to do in order to enable the company that we work for to make and deliver the services and the goods on time? So here's another version of this, pretty close, a lot of things the same. Goals and scope. Key achievements, budgets, again, budgets show up all the time. And then on the supply chain side, expectations, statements of work, deliverables, pretty much the same types of things from the supply chain, and pretty much the same thing, just in a little bit different version for the project management. So it breaks down and they still line up pretty closely. There's some keys to success. I use these for keys to success in supply chain management, but these also apply to project managers. Customer needs, wants, and focus. So you've got to keep the eye on the customer, but you also have to know what the goals are, what the objectives, what the difference between wants and needs. And you want to make sure that you understand who the stakeholders are and who needs to be apprised of information. Both organizations live and work and are judged by their goals that are defined and documented and that we share throughout the supply chain oftentimes, and then throughout the project on the PMI side. We all have to meet our obligations because that's the name of the game, is to have the goals and achieve the goals. Communication is important. Managing cost. We all have to be aware of that little cost creep that, oh yeah, we make a good deal, but guess what? 6 months later, it doesn't look like such a good deal because things have changed a little bit. And both organizations have to be aware that time really is money and that it's important to manage the timing as well as the monetary budget. So we use some project management in supply chain in a lot of different areas. One of the big areas that we use project management, or that we are involved in a project management activity, is when we have a new product development. And we'll look at that in a little bit. But we find that we need these resources, and which are time and money. We need the scope and the goals, all of these different things. We all have to be responsive. We both have to have communication skills. Change management is a big aspect of project management, but it's also an important part of supply chain management too, because we're always making changes, and things like configuration management come into play, where we have to manage the people, the drawings, the specs, the parts themselves, the differences, all of these kinds of things. And both organizations are always trying to do some process improvements. So let's talk about product life cycles, because this is one area where I think that supply management and project management really, again, are intersecting, are overlapping, are interwoven is probably a better term for that. And part of that is in strategic sourcing. Now, when we do a lot of our more routine sourcing activities, it might be a mini project and we have a process. So it's a project in that we have a process, but those are pretty quick and regularly executed. So they don't really constitute the project's status that we give a lot of other things. But if you have strategic sourcing activities, those are typically a project in and of themselves, because you have a cross-functional team that's working on that. You have a lot of people that have their different goals and their different perspectives, and that's very powerful to try to find the right supplier. You have to do some working across lines and across company lines, right? Because you're working not only with team members from your team, you might be working with people from the customer side or from various suppliers, from different logistics providers, 3PL. So a lot of different potential interfaces during that strategic sourcing. But a lot of the strategic sourcing happens in a new product development or a major product overhaul. So let's take a look at the product life cycle for a second. So this is the typical product life cycle that in this case, it's showing 5 different steps. There are, between about 4 and 6 steps in various product life cycles that you can find. But this one I picked in particular, I didn't create it. I just enhanced it a bit. But it starts with product development. And I think that's a very important thing to consider in looking at this between project management and supply chain, because in supply chain, that's a very important part. We are looking at the product development and developing that. And that's where for years, people in purchasing and supply chain have fought to have a seat at the table as these products get developed very early on in that concurrent engineering kind of thing. So early inclusion, that type of work being done. So product development is very important. And this shows the sales and the profits. You can see that the profits, of course, during product development and even intro of the product itself are usually in the negative. And then you get into the growth or the launch section, and that's where your profits start to peak. In the maturity section is actually where they do peak. And then you get into the decline, which is also called end of life or obsolescence. So they're pretty much the same. In this case, it shows sales and profits, the sales peaking into the maturity age and then declining. But the supply chain involvement is right there. And as is the project management. So we start with the product development. We go into the introduction. We're buying and setting up suppliers, parts, we're buying parts, setting them up, making sure we have the right supply pool for the project, making sure we have the right capacity, capability, expectation set in through the growth, maturity, and then ultimately to decline. So we tend to fall off a little bit before the sales, as does operations, because you don't want operations to continue making things while after you've closed down all the marketing and you're not really selling anything. So there's some areas to move forward on in that regard. We want to reduce or shut off the production and then consume the last inventory, because ideally you don't want any leftover inventory, unintended inventory at the end. You want to sell everything. So that's an important aspect. In new product development, you've got a lot more steps. There's a lot of testing. There's developing. You test it, you develop it, you test it, you deploy it, you review it, design or redesign it, launch it, develop it, test it some more. So this is a little left-handed curve for me because it's counterclockwise, this cycle, but it is a cycle and it does repeat. So in this case, again, a lot of testing and developing until you get it right? Until we find the right combination, the right supplier, the right method, the right tooling, all of those kinds of things. And we have this proof of concept stage, which is early on in the product life cycle, in that development. And in that stage, we're worried about schedules and budgets. We have a lot of cross-functional teams. We're doing a lot of communication and a lot of documentation. And this really is the same for both project managers and supply chain managers. If we're creating a new project or a new building or whatever it is, if it's new, we have all of these things going on. A lot of coordination between stakeholders, and in project management, it's more stakeholders and managers and the sponsors and the champions. In supply chain, it's the stakeholders and the suppliers where we're doing the communication and coordination. But we also have champions and sponsors from the supply chain side. A lot of checkpoints and milestones to make sure things are moving along. We're making the progress we need to make. There are validation points where we have to get the first article from the supplier and we have to check it out and make sure it meets all of our requirements. And some of these become projects in and of themselves. So to do the supplier surveys and proof the suppliers out, that can be a small project. Validating first article parts and putting them together and making sure everything works there is kind of a mini project in the whole thing. And what we find is that the more successful we are, the more projects we're going to be able to do, to accomplish, and get assigned to work on, because success breeds more of the same. With the product launch, we all know that schedule is critical, and project managers have a firm eye on that launch date from the very early on in the project. As soon as they can ascertain this is our best estimate of launch date, they set that out, and that's their target, and that's what they're meeting. Sometimes the date is determined not by the project, but by the circumstances. For example, if you think about the World Cup that's going on now, those dates were set years ago. So the tournament's going on in Dubai, and Dubai knew that they had to be ready by November of 2022 to have everything in place so that they could actually conduct that. I live in Los Angeles, and we have been selected as the 2028 Olympic site, the Summer Olympic site. So there's been motion and activity going on to support that for the last couple of years since we were selected, and that's going to become more and more intense. We actually just built a new football stadium here in Los Angeles. We have two teams. We have the Rams and the Chargers, and we built a new stadium for them. We did not as a city, thank heaven, but it was built. And that was a big project, multi-year project. So a lot of these projects can take a while. If you've worked on new projects in your company, they can take anywhere from about 3 months, 6 months to a couple of years. And in some car companies, they used to take about 5 years to launch a new car. That's down considerably to 30 to 36 months, which is a much, more friendly timeline. But 30 months on a project is still a long time to get that first article launched and get that product launched and in the marketplace. But the product launch is pretty similar for both project management and supply chain. In project management, they need a schedule, they need to have an announcement, they start taking orders, they fulfill the orders, and they manage the budget once the product is launched. In supply chain, we have to understand the same thing. What is our need date, our launch date? We have schedules that we're trying to meet. We're trying to coordinate, sometimes amongst a couple different suppliers. If we're doing a lot of in-house manufacturing or in-house assembly, we've got to coordinate with suppliers and coordinate with the in-house factory to make sure they get what they need and that the factory has time to do what they need to do in order to produce those products to get them to marketplace on time. And then supply chain, we're often also tasked with looking at the logistics and the transportation that we need in order, once it's finished in our factory, to get it to wherever it needs to be. We're also concerned about inventory. How much do we need? Where do we need it? How are we managing our material and the labor costs, because we're overseeing a lot of that. And so there's a lot of different types of budgets to manage there and a lot of different detail. The inventory policies alone can take hours for companies to hash out and say, how are we going to manage this inventory? Because we have distributors, we have retailers, we sell direct to customers. So where is our fulfillment hub and how are we doing this? We have more and more complications today. One of the things that the pandemic taught us is that we can do a lot of e-commerce and we can do a lot of direct to customers. Some companies even decided that, hey, this is such a good idea that we're still able to do this. We're going to opt out of brick and mortar stores. If you don't know, Godiva Chocolates has done that. So for years, Godiva Chocolates had lots of ways to sell, and they sell through various and sundry stores, but they also had brick and mortar stores in a lot of malls. They had little boutique type things where you could go in and treat yourself to a piece of candy and buy it by the piece. And then you could also buy boxes kind of big and small for occasions like Christmas or office parties or whatever. And nowadays, they decided during the pandemic, when they shut down, they said, you know what, we're not going to open those back up. We're just going to keep doing everything via e-commerce. So there are still some retailers that sell Godiva chocolate and you can buy it, or it's easy to go online and buy. And they found that that saved them quite a bit of money. Also know that any change like that requires a lot of project management too, because you're looking at, all right, now I'm going to change my supply chain where I don't have this retailer and I have to move things around. I have to account for the inventory because it's all our inventory. In the case of Godiva, they own the stores. So now where does that inventory, how do we get it back? We've got shelf life issues to worry about. We've got a lot of different things. So it gets to be kind of complicated. In the growth phase of the product life cycle, PMI is doing a lot of observing, watching, and reporting. So the project manager is not actually doing a lot of the work. They're overseeing that work and making sure that they're subject matter experts and that the people that they have designated or have been designated to work on their team are actually accomplishing the work that they have set out to do, that is scheduled and is budgeted. So it's not unusual to make adjustments all along the way during this growth or launch kind of stage, because you're learning what you didn't know and you're making those adjustments and then moving forward. In supply chain, we do the same thing. We're always looking at issues related to the quality, to the materials we're buying, to the processes, to the techniques and the modes of transportation that we've chosen, the lead times that we've budgeted. Are they panning out? Do they need to be lengthened, or can we shorten them a little bit? What are the buffers that we have in our supply chain? How are our suppliers doing with ramping to production? We've got an eye on that forecast the whole time, saying we know that we had good, the best information that we could get from our team, our marketing team and our sales team, that said, this is what we think we're going to be able to sell. This is the forecast. And we've translated that to our suppliers. And now we're keeping an eye on that, saying, were they right? And are we ramping at the right rate? Or is this project or product or service taking off more quickly in the marketplace? Or are we seeing some late adopters? So we're not moving as fast up that growth curve as we thought. Then we need to kind of ratchet back and not push our suppliers so hard to get inventory that is just going to sit on the shelf, either at the suppliers or in our raw material inventory. So we're managing that, tweaking them as we go. We're coordinating with marketing, we're modifying our forecasts, looking at our finished goods as well as our raw material, expediting where we need to, slowing down where and as we need to. So all of this is a lot of coordination across the supply chain. And in the project, everybody is the same thing. They're looking at how are they going to manage this? And when they're actually getting this work done, is it getting done at the rate they expect? And how can they move budget from one place to another if one organization or one faction of the project is overrunning or underrunning, ahead of schedule, behind schedule? How does that impact the whole? And they're constantly looking at that and adjusting, revising, and updating the key stakeholders on the project and the progress that they're making. So when we get into the maturity, when we're all supposed to be really blowing and going and getting this thing done as a project and getting this product out to the market on a consistent basis as a supply chain, we're doing a lot of monitoring, reporting, tracking in supply chain. But the PMI team might be actually, once this gets to this, what we call the maturity stage, production stage, but the actual project management might be wrapping up because they've got the product launched now. That was the end of their project, so they're moving on to another product. So that's oftentimes where we see some discrepancies between the two, project management and supply chain management, because the launch of the project might be as far as it goes, and then that team goes off and works on another new development project. Some of them may continue on with the maturity or the production stage, but not all of them typically do. They fall off and work on other things. So in the maturity stage, traditionally, as operations people in supply chain, we focused a lot on cost reduction. And in some industries, that's still an area to focus on the cost reduction. But in technology companies, if you haven't already built your cost reduction strategies in by the time you launch, it's too late. These products have very short product life cycles. So when it comes to the maturity production stage, it might take a while to develop it and get it launched, but once it's launched, it will run for maybe a short period of time. I worked at HP a few years ago, and we made inkjet printers, and we would take a while to develop things, but once we got them developed and launched, we would only manufacture them for about 9 to 12 months. And then we were on to another version of that. We would upgrade it, change it, modify, or just get a whole new product out. We try to sometimes borrow parts and use things from one model to another, but some standardization, but they did not last very long in the marketplace. And if you think about iPhones, I use iPhones all the time as an example. They introduce a phone every year. So they are not long production runs for them either. They don't, right now they announced the iPhone 14 in September. They're in production of that, but they won't be in production of that much into the new year. I don't know the exact length of time, but they start working on the next one pretty quickly. So if you remember a couple of years ago, I think it was the 10 that they introduced, and it did not do as well as they had anticipated. And they announced in the December, January time that they were shutting production down, that they had made enough product by that time at the rates they had projected, because the demand wasn't what they projected. They were shutting down their production. So they over anticipated. They had an aggressive forecast that didn't come to fruition, and they shut that down and went on to the next one in due time. So there's this stage can last a long time if you think about some standard products like maybe cleaning products or household products that you use. Some things last a long time. I always use paper towels as a good example, because paper towels, they continue to make, and I think they'll make in perpetuity as long as we have the kind of disposable need for those things that we have today. But that's a product that has very stable. So once that product is introduced, it stays in production for quite a long time. But we're focusing on managing the inventory, reducing the lead times, the cycle times, the cost reduction, improving productivity, improving efficiency. So if you make things for a long time, think about cars. Those car models are made for quite a while, even though they change from 2022 to a 2023 to 2024 version. There's still, in essence, a lot of similarities there. So they're tweaking it, and they're still working on, again, cost reductions, reducing lead times, reducing cycle times, improved productivity and efficiency. And then we get to the stage that's the end of life. So this is the decline, the end of the closing down of the product line. The product itself. So sometimes we have products that are replaced by newer versions, and so they have more of a soft phase out than a hard one, because we kind of morph from one into the other. If you draw the product life cycle, they kind of cross over, and things and resources and people and parts and everything gets moved from one to the other. In this area, we find that products no longer have the same market value that they had before, so that starts to wane. So supply chain, this is, if we have an actual end of life of a part or a contract, then we have a significant amount of oversight that's required. We're looking at where's the raw material. And if you know anything about the supply chains, you know that if you have a sudden stop in production and a shutdown, then it can be almost catastrophic. You have raw materials not only in-house, but you have raw materials, work in process, finished goods at your supplier, and maybe they have some at their supplier, and maybe even down to tier 3 suppliers. So one of the examples I always use for that is, if you remember the Note 7 phone, that was the one that had the issues with exploding or burning. It got too hot. So that was a phone that was in its introduction. It was in that ramp phase and growth. They had just introduced it. Tech people loved it, but guess what? It started burning people, and they had a couple that actually exploded. And they thought, they did some work. They stopped they kind of halted things. They did some work. They said, oh, it's battery manufacturer number one, or whatever one. They said it was a battery and it was related to one of the manufacturers. They had multiple ones because they had anticipated making lots of these. And then so they resumed, and when they resumed, they kicked everybody back into gear. They told their suppliers, there's the remaining battery supplier or suppliers, we're going to need more because we have to replace these for these first units. And then we still have to do our production, and we're going to have to do some rework and repair. So we need you to handle this extra inventory that now is going to be a gap. And then not too long after that, they slammed on the brakes completely and they said, no, this phone has to stop. I remember very clearly being at an airport getting ready to get on a plane, and they said, Note 7 phones are not allowed. The FAA has banned that, or the airline, I don't remember which, but that the airline said very clearly, if you have one of those phones, you are not allowed to board this plane, and you are not allowed to put it in your luggage either. So if you have that phone, we can take it for you, but you are not getting on this plane with that phone. So that was a big deal. And they had lots and lots of material in that pipeline because they were in that growth stage. And so all of their suppliers and sub-tier suppliers were cranking pretty hard, expecting to ramp up week over week on their production, and they slammed on the brakes for that. So that was a big impact to that Samsung phone. So we have a lot of things to manage in that phase, the end of life. Once we decide that we phase it out, hopefully we've had some time to plan this, and we're doing this in a gradual scenario so that we can dispose of things and we don't end up with a lot of extra raw material, weapon material, finished goods. We typically want to have some raw, usually maybe some finished goods to do some repairs or swap outs with, and then some repairs and upkeep for parts for so long. That's typical, but we had people building things and people doing things either at our company and at our supplier, and now they need new homes. They need to go different places and do different things. So overall, we have some shared challenges with this. With supply chain, we've got a lot of matrix management. We have a lot of bosses, and we have a lot of stakeholders and partners. We have a lot of people to work with and work with and around in the organization. But supply chain also has huge potential to contribute positively to the company. On the other hand, we can bring a company to its knees too if we're not managing the supply chain carefully. So our wrong decisions can have a huge impact. And we know that risk is everywhere. It's lurking everywhere. And we don't want to do things over and over and over. So we don't want to be Sisyphus and do something today and then find out we didn't do it quite right. We have to do it again tomorrow. But we do have to do due diligence on all of this. So we're looking at how we can analyze things. Financial things are important. We're looking at targets that are constantly moving and environment that's moving. So we have a lot of change management to handle through our own organization, plus all the other interfacing organizations. We're trying to be more flexible. Today, we're talking about agility, flexibility, resilience in the supply chain, and it's enough to give you a headache. We need some leadership in this area, and we need some solid skills because it is complex. Today, supply chains are global, and these projects that we work on are often global as well. We have lots and lots of nodes in the supply chain, and the pandemic uncovered a few that people really weren't keeping an eye on, that they discovered that, yeah, we do need to keep an eye on these. We don't have a lot of autonomy today in functions. Cycle times are long. Lead times can be longer than ever. We're trying to coordinate between companies in supply chain across time zones, functions, currencies, all of these things. And we need those processes, those project management processes and steps so that we can do that coordination and stay in sync, keeping all of these balls that we're constantly juggling in the air and on track and on time. As we manage changing designs and specifications, forecasts that are crazy, everything from bullwhip effects to new products to no demand for things, to things like Godiva saying, nope, no more Brick and mortar stores, we're just doing things this. So that blows your forecast out of the water, and you have to rethink all of those things. And you have to do that on the fly because you're continuing to produce and buy parts and make parts as you're making these changes and doing these adjustments. And then we also have a lot of political and economic forces that kind of push us all over the map. So we have a lot that we're trying to keep on our plates and keep managed. But we have a winning combination because supply chain requires coordination throughout and across the supply chain, and project management is focused on coordination of a lot of activities. So there's a lot we can learn from project management professionals and people trained in that area, and it's a good skill to bring into a purchasing or a supply chain organization. So these tools are great. They're not limited to people with PMI certifications, PMPs, and things like that. We can get those templates. We can get those tools. We can use those for the projects that we're managing in sourcing or new product development or product changeovers and upgrades. We need to have policies and procedures. We need to have metrics to measure that. We need to stay on track on both time and budget dollars. So we have time budgets as well as we have dollar budgets, and we need to stay on track with both of those. We need to define activities pretty specifically in some cases and make sure all of our I's are dotted and T's are crossed. But using these skills and uniting these skills can really be a powerful combination. So what I know for sure is that we have to know the goals and top level goals of the stakeholders when we undertake a project in supply chain or any other kind of project. Productivity matters and efficiency matters. Productivity is a ratio of outputs over inputs. Efficiencies is how well we're getting that work done, which is related to productivity. And it's also related to what is our capacity and how well are we using the capacity that we have. If we use a PMI approach in a lot of applications, we're going to get better results. We're going to be able to help ourselves clearly define the scopes of work, and we're going to help ourselves manage the project, the people, the time, the money, all of the aspects of that. We're going to be able to do that better if we know a little bit about project management. Communication is always very important, up, down, all around, making sure that all the stakeholders are informed and getting the information they need in a timely fashion. And one of the things I've learned is it's really important for any kind of project that I've ever worked on and in supply chain to ask for help before the damage is really bad and irreversible. So I always told my staff, come to me with a problem. I'd rather have you tell me, hey, this might be a problem, and talk about how we can work on it, than think it's going to be okay and it might go away and have to come and tell me, guess what? We had a catastrophe, the stuff hit the fan here, and this is all a big problem. So if we can keep those things from happening and turning into major issues by asking for help, alerting people to what's going on, we're going to get better results, and we're all going to sleep better at night. So what's next? There's a lot of things that you can do with project management tools and techniques in supply chains, in supply chain organizations. So think about what opportunities are in your company. What kinds of costs and schedules and risks are you trying to manage this year? And how are you prepping for that in 2023? I can't believe it's going to be 2023 in just a matter of days now, since we're into December officially, and it's time to plan for 2023 if you haven't already. So who needs assistance? If you need assistance, help is available. You can contact me. I have a broad network of resources available, and I have a lot of tools and techniques that help a lot of companies do things better. You can go to callwithjane.com. That puts you to my calendar, and you get a free 30-minute call with me to talk about just about anything that you might want to talk about in terms of supply chain, and especially if you're interested in talking about project management in your business. If you're like me, you come to these talks and you say, oh yeah, that's a good idea. I could use that, or I could use some help in that area. And you get inspired and you get anxious and you get kind of excited about something, and then you go back to your email and you say, oh no, here's my crisis of the day, and here's the thing that's hitting the fan, and you kind of forget about that. So I encourage you to make that call with me sooner rather than later. And if you do, then I'll give you a little bit of an incentive to do that, because I'm going to give away a raffle right now and to people. And if you make that call with Jane, you're also entitled to be given a reward for that. So you'll get some extra perks about what we give from Purple Link. So this is your last chance to get into the raffle. You need to send me an email right now to jane@purplelink.co. And if you haven't done that, then I'm going to give you about another 60 seconds to do that. In the meantime, I'm going to check my random number generator here and make sure that it's functioning. And I'm going to make sure that I count all the people that have been in the, that have sent me emails to be involved in the raffle. So give me just a second here.
Okay, and Jane, and we do have one question when you're ready for that.
Okay, I'll do the raffle and then we'll do the questions. I think we have time.
Yeah, we do.
Okay. Okay, so the winner of the raffle is Patty Spencer. Patty, are you still online?
I'm going to check. I think she is. Yes, she is. Patty, you're the winner.
So Patty, you need to send me an email. I'm going to send you a gift card via email. So you need to send me an email where I can send the gift card. If it's different than just confirm which one you want me to use. So I'm going to leave you with one thing real quick, and then I'll take questions. I think this was interesting to me. William Pollard, who I really didn't know about, but he said that learning and innovation go hand in hand. And the arrogance of success is thinking that what we did yesterday is going to be sufficient for tomorrow. And I think that is very true in supply chain today. And I also think it's true in project management. William Pollard actually was born in 1911 and died in 1989. He was both a physicist and an Episcopal priest. He started his career as a professor of physics at the University of Tennessee, worked at the Oak Ridge Institute for Nuclear Studies. He had a unique blend of his religion, his Christianity, and his science. And he really worked throughout his life to learn different things and do different things, and really keep recreating himself. And I think that's what we have to do today. We can't sit on our laurels as supply chain professionals and think that what we did 5 years ago is going to be able to get us through the next 5 years. So I will take questions.
Oh, sure. Okay, so we did get one question in. When should a supply chain professional cross over to being a formal PM with the pursuit of obtaining the PMP certification?
That's a good question. I think you have to look at your own interests in that regard. Are you really interested in doing that and getting that certification and applying that? You also have to look at where you're working or where you would like to be working. Do they have a need for that? Or is that something that you want to do and then go pursue an organization that's looking for those skills? So I think you kind of have to balance that. But you need a little bit of, you need to make sure that you've got at least some basics of, say, supply chain, if you want to stay in that, and that you can bring that set of skills with the project management skills. I've worked with project management people who have very good project management skills, don't really know about supply chain, but we can educate them on that and they become a big asset. And then the other way around, supply chain people who know up and down about operations and supply chain, not much about PMI, but when they take a course or they start looking at the certification for that, they say, wow, this really applies and I can use these different things. So I think it's kind of an individual timeline, but think about where your interests and your passions are, because I think that should always drive you.
Okay, that's the only question that came in. If anybody else has a question, please just put it in the chat If not, at this time, I actually would like to say thank you, Jane, for presenting this material to our ISM community. And we do appreciate all of our attendees for joining us today as well. We will be sending out a follow-up email with a copy of the recording. So that way, if you'd like to review it again, you can. Please share it with your colleagues as well. And then everybody for attending today also will earn their continuing educational credit as well.
And if you send me email, I will send you the slides to this presentation. I'm happy to share those. And I also wanted to say, Kathy, that I do, as I said, I am a certified instructor for CPSM and CPSD classes. And I'm doing a CPSM class in starting in, I think, late January. I'm not sure if I've finalized the dates yet or not, but I'll be doing that in the February timeframe and continuing that on and on throughout the year. So if anybody's interested in that, I do those courses. I do them online. They're about an hour and a half a week with me, with whoever else is joining the class, and then your self-study. But I think it helps to have a process and a schedule to kind of study, again, project management techniques, right? Have your schedule study, set your dates for taking the test, and then making sure that you're able to do that. So I'm certified to do that and happy to include anybody from anywhere in the country because we do them online and it's easy to do and I record them. So that's open as well.
So Jane, in case anybody wants to connect with you on LinkedIn, what's the best way to reach you on LinkedIn?
LinkedIn is just Jane Tierney and my company's Purple Link. There's a couple Jane Tierneys, but if you look for the one that works at Purple Link.
Yep.
And you did put my email in the chat and you can always do that as well.
That's great. That's great. Because I know sometimes you do post some messages about your upcoming training. So that's why I thought it'd be good for them to
I do,
connect with
and
you.
I have been really bad at that. I got sick this fall and actually had to cancel one of the events I had scheduled with Kathy, but I do monthly webinars and I didn't do a very good job of advertising that for myself. So if you sent me your email, emailed me, you're going to get a copy of the slides. I did give the Amazon gift card away, and then you'll get signed up for my monthly webinars. So I do those once a month on Thursdays. I can't remember what the schedule is for the next year, but I'll start those again in January. I kind of fell off that wagon at the end of this year, but we're going to be back on track in January.
That's right. We're all looking forward to 2023.
And
Thanks,
it's a
Jane.
great way to get a CEH credit too. So the one time a month. So
definitely. Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us. And thank you, Jane. And everybody have a great day.
And happy holidays, Kathy, to you and your family and everyone else if I don't see you before the end of the year.
Thank you. Thank you, Jane. Happy holidays to you too as well. Bye-bye, everybody.